Hey party people, Techno here, and we are back with Sans Holiday Hack Challenge 2022 with the next challenge in our quest to recover the Tolkien Ring. In the last video, we took a look at the Wireshark practice challenge, Wireshark phishing, and helped Sparkle Redberry figure out what had happened with a malware-infected host. In this one, we're going to be doing some event log analysis, and we're going to help Dusty Gift Wrap here kind of figure out what's been going on. Dusty noticed that the lembon bread that they'd been making is starting to taste a little fishy, and they think that the secret ingredient may have been compromised. So if we take a look at our badge for this challenge, we can see that this is slightly more difficult than the Wireshark challenge, but still on the easy side. And we have a link here to download some event logs that we can review, for example, in Windows Event Log Viewer, which is how I'm going to be approaching this. They've also created a flat text file of these logs that you can analyze within the terminal here. So once we log in and get started, we get a little bit of a backstory here. So let's take a look at that. Grincham successfully downloaded his keylogger and has gathered the admin credentials. We think he used PowerShell to find the lembon recipe and steal our secret ingredient. Luckily, we enabled PowerShell auditing and have exported the Windows PowerShell logs to a flat text file. Let's analyze these logs and answer the questions. And are we ready to begin? Yes, I think we are. All right, so the first question is, what month, day, or year did the attack take place? And we have an example format here. So I guess to get started, let's go ahead and just take a look at what we have in the event viewer here. So we notice our logs, in this case, end at just about a quarter before midnight on Christmas Eve. That in and of itself, I think, is a little bit of a giveaway considering the theme of the event. You know, it was the night before Christmas and all through the house, not a creature was stirring except for the malicious attacker executing remote PowerShell commands on our machine. But in any case, let's just take a closer look at what we have going on here so we can confirm this sneaking suspicion. And really what we're most interested in here is finding what commands were executed. So we can actually eliminate a lot of this additional cruft here by filtering this down to event 4104 or event ID 4104 just to see what commands are being executed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as we start to scroll through our logs here, we're going to see we got a get process, we got some other stuff going on. And as we continue to scroll and kind of just review these commands that are being executed here, well, we have, a deleting of a text file. Okay, delete recipe underscore updated dot text. Interesting. Okay, delete recipe dot text. Well, this is starting to give the impression that this is probably the date in question. Here we have a command that's adding content to one of those recipe files, another one, and here it looks like we have some commands that are replacing honey with fish oil. Okay, interesting. I think at this point in time, we can say that the date in question that we're looking at is most likely Christmas Eve of 2022. Makes sense, right? Okay, next question. An attacker got a secret from a file. What was the original file's name? All right, so jumping back into our event logs here. Now, these are sort of in reverse order with the newest event at the top of the log. You can click on the date and time column here to switch this around so it's kind of more, I suppose, depending on the way you think, logically oriented to when the events took place. So we have the historical perspective there. Now, we want to know what the original file's name was. We saw a couple commands here being executed, such as an ls and catting of files. But if we want to see the output of those, we're going to have to modify our event filter, our filter slightly. So let's go back into the filter and let's add event 4103, which is going to show us the output of those various commands that are being executed. And we will focus on the night of Christmas Eve, since we know that is when this attack was taking place. And now we can kind of go back through and start looking at, again, skimming these, seeing if anything interesting jumps out to us. And as we scroll, eventually what we're going to find is that we are getting some file names shown to us as far as what is in the directory that this attacker is working with currently. So I'll scroll through here and look for an example. Okay, here is one. Here we have the ls command being executed, which is being translated to get child item in PowerShell. And the output of that is recipe. Okay, so we're at 605. We're pretty far away from the attack here. So it looks like recipe is likely that original file that we were working with. Let's scroll down to the end and see if we can get any more information to kind of confirm that. And of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here. We're going to see the output from some of those other commands that we saw being executed, such as those catting of contents and adding contents to files. And as we scroll through here, we already know that there's some other files apart from recipe, right? We saw a recipe.txt being manipulated. We saw a recipe updated.txt being removed or deleted, rather. And here we see that again. So it looks like, based on the fact that earlier in the night, the first one that we saw was that recipe, and we hadn't yet seen recipe underscore updated. Interesting. Okay, so here we have an ls at 6:05, so this is a little later, about a minute later than what we last saw. It looks like we have some additional files. So in addition to that recipe, we have recipe.txt and recipe underscore updated.txt. But based on the timeline of events, it appears that those came later, perhaps created by the attacker. We'll find out more about that as we move through. But I think it's probably safe to say that the original file was that recipe file. And just as a note here, playing around with this a little bit, I noticed that question number 2 will also accept recipe.txt as a valid answer. That being said, as we see going through the questions later, it will be confirmed that recipe was in fact the original file because recipe.txt is eventually deleted, and that's going to play into a later question. We'll talk about it when we get there. In any case, number 3. The contents of the previous file were retrieved, changed, and stored to a variable by the attacker. This was done multiple times. Submit the last full PowerShell line that performed only these actions. Okay, I think we can find that. So for this, again, we are at the moment only concerned with commands that are being executed. So just to eliminate a lot of the extra stuff that we're looking at, I'm going to remove that 4103 from our filter. And let's just take a look at commands that are being executed. So as we go back through the series of events, working backwards, we see those the delete files that we saw earlier. So delete recipe updated, delete recipe.txt. There's that ls. Okay, so we're catting the recipe file now. We would see the output of that with 4103. We'll probably end up taking a look at that later. All right, so here we have adding content to a file. That's interesting, but we're more interested in the full PowerShell line that performed only the actions of retrieving, changing, and storing variables. So we haven't quite come across that yet, but as we walk through here, okay, there's some more adding of content. Here we go. This is interesting. So here we have a variable, and we're retrieving the contents of the recipe file, and then we're doing a find and replace from honey to fish oil. Okay, so that's most likely, and going back from the latest time that we have, this is the first occurrence of this, so this is probably the last time that this was issued. So let's give that a try. Let's copy this out, and let's put that in our answer column here. Cool, there's our answer. Now, number 4, after storing the altered file contents into the variable, the attacker used the variable to run a separate command that wrote modified data to a file, and this was done multiple times. Submit the last full PowerShell line that performed only these actions. Well, we already saw, as we were reviewing these logs, a number of times where we saw that add content to modify a file. So let's just go back. Let's start at the very last event that we have logged here and work backwards to the first time we see one of those add content commands, because that's going to give us the answer to this next question. So again, our deletes, our cats, and here we go. So here is the variable add content to recipe. And this is going to give us the answer to our next question. Assuming that I can copy and paste it into the terminal. There we go. All right, number 5, the attacker ran the previous command against one file multiple times. What is the name of this file? So in this case, we saw it being run against a number of files, but if we review the event logs, we're going to see that the command was run multiple times against this recipe.txt file. So there's add content to recipe.txt. And again, add content to recipe.txt. And even if we continue to go back in time through these logs, we see that command executed again. So for whatever reason, recipe.txt has been, been the target of this command multiple times. So there's going to be our next answer. It's recipe.txt. Now, were any files deleted? We already know the answer to this question from just scrolling through these logs already. We know that at least 2 files were deleted. So in this case, we can see yes. And now it was the original file from question 2 deleted? And this is the question that I was referencing just a bit ago. We already know that the recipe.txt file and recipe_updated.txt file were both deleted and also created after that original recipe file. So despite the fact that question 2 seems to accept both recipe and recipe.txt as answers, if we try, that's going to change, the answer to this question. So was the original file from question 2 deleted? Well, if you answered recipe.txt, you would be inclined to say yes here, but that's not going to be the correct answer because the original file was in fact that recipe file, which was never deleted. We never actually saw a delete for that. So this is going to be no. Now finally, what is the event ID of the logs that show the actual command lines the attacker typed and ran? Well, that's what we've been filtering down and primarily working with to eliminate a lot of the other cruft in the files that we're not so concerned about. So that is event ID 4104. And was the secret ingredient compromised? Well, it certainly appears so based on the find and replace that we saw from honey to fish oil, but apart from a few other cool Easter eggs that are in these event logs, if you scroll back through notable holidays that are in timeline-wise are included in this, we can also take a look at some of these other things in here, or some of the other logs in here. And if I enable the output of these, I just want to show that as we go back through, I went too far because I have reverse sorted. So as we look here, we can see that some of these files are being catted. So here's the original file, cat recipe. And here's the output from that. So we can see that this recipe came from the Mixolydian, Queen of Dorian. And it's the Lembon original recipe. We go through here and we see all kinds of ingredients. But note right here, we have half a teaspoon of honey, and that is the secret ingredient. And then continue to go through. Might actually be interesting to try this recipe in real life and see how well it works out. But that's something that I wanted to point out there within the question of, was the recipe compromised? Then we saw that honey, that secret ingredient, and some of the other command output was being modified to fish oil. So I think it is safe to say that yes, that has been compromised. And what is the secret ingredient? Well, we also just answered this question by reviewing that output. It was honey. And that's going to conclude the event log analysis of this challenge. So now we are one more challenge closer to retrieving the Tolkien ring and also saving Christmas at KringleCon 2022. So again, thanks for sticking with me through that one. I may not have done the best job of explaining everything that was going on in the event logs. Hopefully it was clear. But in any case, I thank you for watching. In the next challenge, we will tackle, or in the next video rather, we'll tackle the last challenge standing between us and the Tolkien Ring. And until then, take care, everyone. I will talk to you later.